How's it going, guys? Duoface here. Welcome back to my first ever proper Super Mario Maker 2 guides video, and today I'm going to show you guys how to do some proper design in Super Mario Maker 2. In this video, I'm going to be covering basically various ways you can design both blocks in Mario Maker 2 and air in Mario Maker 2. So let's get right into that, shall we? To specify what I mean by block design and air design, I've decided to highlight it here. The place I've highlighted in white is where the block design should be. It's normally inaccessible, and is only there to make the level look better than just spamming ground blocks everywhere, or just being an empty layout. Meanwhile, the place I've highlighted blue is air design, where the player usually goes around and, plays a level. There are different ways to decorate both, and first I'm going to be covering ground design. So the first and most basic way to design a level is by just creating lines of ground blocks. Like this. You literally just get some ground and you place it around in like a line to create the layout of the level. Now, normally this style would almost never be used, because this style is probably the most basic and boring type of style that there is to create in Super Mario Maker. However, very rarely, in certain themes such as the Super Mario Bros. Jungle theme, this can actually work, because as you can see here, it creates a sort of pipe path, which actually works well as a level design, because it's like you're walking on a bunch of miniature pipes. That's just kind of the aesthetic of it, especially since the start of the level is a bunch of really skinny pipes. That's the whole theme. But, as I just said, this usually doesn't work well in any sort of level, so let's move on to the next type of block design, which I see often. The next design type is probably the most used design type and the most basic. Basically, you just fill up every single empty space that the player can't go to with ground blocks, because it is very reliable, very easy to do, and that's basically it. Most often, it's a better idea to, rather than place a one wide wall, you'd place two, because usually it just tends to look better. However, in certain themes, this can be different. For example, in underwater levels, even though it's usually would be a good idea to just have normal blocks, if you erase these and make like a one tall thing, you can create a little coral type obstacle. A similar thing happens in the desert theme, where instead of coral, of course, you get a really tall dead shrub, as a result of it being a hot and dry desert. And while on the topic of basic design, I'll also bring up the fact that you can use, of course, semi-solids and mushroom platforms as a standard for regular platforms. The only difference that these platforms have with normal ones is the fact that you can fall through the sides and die like that. However, that's not much of an issue, especially if it's in a theme like the Sky theme, where in my opinion, it's probably a better option. Because if it's a sky, then it works better if, of course, it doesn't feel very restricted. You feel loose and free, even when falling to your death. Not to mention, the Sky theme also brings up a point, which I'll mention now. Using nothing but ground blocks to fill in block design can sometimes look bad. For example, the regular blocks in the Sky theme in Super Mario Bros. 1 don't really mesh together very well. So instead you just kind of have this, it just doesn't look very good. So that's about it on the basic block design. So next I'll go on to other types of block design which I've seen within levels, which are pretty easy to replicate. So one of the better ways to make a level look better is to simply add semi-solids everywhere, instead of normal ground, to replace the insides. Because not only does this save on blocks, but it makes your level feel a little bit more dynamic, as you can see with this semi-solid, because the inside of the blocks just look a little bit better. You can also decide how many layers of ground you want in between the ground and the semi-solids, to maybe make the level look a little bit different, because experimenting with this is a good idea. One thing I'll note about the style though, is that sometimes you'll have to be a bit more smart on how you place the semi-solids. Because as you can see here, these semi-solids don't quite blend into each other, so it doesn't quite look good. So I'll quickly show some tips with this design style to try and remove a lot of the problems it has. One way to make semi-solid blocks look a bit better in levels is to fill up their corners with ground blocks. Or, as seen here, you can just drag the semi-solid into the block. Alongside this, to make the semi-solids look a little bit more fluid, you can drag the semi-solids into each other, and then at the point where the intercept is obvious, you can cover that up with ground blocks as well. I'll quickly do that now, off screen. So as you can see now, the semi-solids work a lot better as block design because they share a similar colour to the ground theme, and there's no more obvious overlaps. They've all been covered up, hidden, so that the player can only see the good side of the block design. Another thing which can be done with the semi-solid blocks is combining the ground type design with the semi-solid block type design. So for example, you could have a level design just like this with just semi-solids, or you can fill up semi-solid blocks using grounds like this to make the inside of the block look a bit more dynamic or less square. Another thing I'll mention is it's a good idea to cut corners if you don't want your level looking square, but it's good to fill in those corners with slopes in order for the players to not get slowed down by doing a jump too small and end up crashing into the side of a block. So, I'll quickly mention a couple flaws that this design has. One flaw of this is that sometimes semi-solids really don't work very well as block design depending on the theme. This is especially abundant in Super Mario 3D World because the only types of semi-solids are these cages. And you might think that it would be a cool design idea to maybe stretch the blocks out so that the inside of the block is only this cage. However, for whatever reason, you can't actually take semi-solids through blocks without the top coming through. If you want a semi-solid to go through blocks, only the top can go through blocks, and only if it goes further through and up, which kind of breaks the design a little bit. So in general, semi-solids in 3D World are just a bad choice, and in other themes such as Super Mario Bros. 3, only certain semi-solids actually work with the ground. Say, for example, in Super Mario Bros. 3, alongside a lot of other themes, only one semi-solid tends to work with the ground, so it's the only one you really use, and the level ends up looking a bit repetitive. As seen here. For example, this kind of bland-looking semi-solid, at least it's the same color as the ground, so it works. This one, a little bit less so, and if you use this blue semi-solid to decorate ground blocks, you have literally no soul. Another thing to mention is that those semi-solids add some design to a level, sometimes you're just better off without them. Say for example in the Super Mario Bros. 3 jungle theme, because the jungle theme has these miniature pipes which are meant to, I guess, feel free, loosely connected. I think the same also works with the Mario Bros. 3 desert theme. But unless you're using too thick blocks, so this purple effect doesn't happen, often an empty space inside of this purple looks better than adding a semi-solid in. So, keep all of this in mind when using semi-solids, and we'll mention on semi-solids for block design now, and there's one final block design type that I will talk about next. Though if there's more block design types I haven't spoken of at all, feel free to tell me in the comments, and I might even make a follow-up video to it. But next is the final type of block design. The type of block design which I see most often in levels is this design, where you get a different type of solid block and combine it with a normal ground block to either make a pattern or to make a more textured type of wall, like this. Another thing I'll note is that some blocks work well as block design better than others do, such as these. Some work kind of universally if they change with the theme to fit the ground blocks, while others only work in specific themes. For example, if we change the game style to snow, suddenly these cloud blocks and frozen blocks don't look as bad, while since these brick blocks and hard blocks change color with the theme, this still looks pretty good. The one flaw about this block design that I'd add, other than the fact that some blocks work better than others, is that if you aren't careful with the way you design your blocks, a level can be pretty cheesable and it can be ruined. Say for example, you make a level where, to get to the end, you gotta go through this pipe into a subworld where you do a challenge. But if this challenge involves, say for example, a sharp shellmet, the player can just go back with the shellmet, break through the hard blocks, and get a very easy and cheap win. So when you're using blocks like this, be careful, because pretty much only ground blocks are indestructible. So all of these can be destroyed, all of this can be destroyed. These cloud blocks can't be destroyed, but they can be jumped through, and all sorts. So just be quite careful when you use these blocks, because they can make a level more cheesable. For now, that's it for the block design, so next I'll cover how to design the air. One way to design the air is to simply just not design the air, because sometimes backgrounds do it for you, such as the nighttime airship background in various themes, such as Super Mario Bros. 1's one with moving stars, or Super Mario's World's one, where it gives a very moody type of rain, with flashes for lightning. Sometimes this is literally just better than designing any sort of design for the sky, the places which the player interacts with. So, that's all I'll mention for now, but sometimes design is better than not designing, and sometimes it's best to just leave it empty. So I'll let you guys decide on that for yourselves. Another way to design the air, there's one simple trick you can do, which I don't see too many players harnessing. So, if you spam blocks about, a lot of these bush and flower type things will pop up as a part of the design. However, one thing that some players don't know is that you can replicate these blocks and create something like this, where, for example, fill up a ground piece like this. This design doesn't get in the way and is not at all cheesable because these have absolutely no collision at all. They're just there to usually be random decoration, but if you copy-paste the ground block that it's on, you can create very colourful displays without much effort. Another way you can decorate the air is using semi-solids, as you can see here. Say, for example, using this one makes it look like there's a bunch of really tall trees stretching up into the sky. The one thing I'll mention about this type of design is this. The one issue I'd say with this problem lies within if the player can actually get up there with one method or another, because if the player can get up there, they can then further cheese the level, such as this. They have a good platform to fly all the way to the end with. There's also another issue that arises if the player can reach these. The issue with these is if you have the semi-solids go all the way to a top to avoid players from getting to them, if a player does get onto them, they're basically better off dead, because there's absolutely no way to get down. As you can see here, since one way is blocked off and the other way is the place where the screen stops, there's absolutely no way to get down from here, so the player basically dies if they get up top here. However, that's basically the only issue with this design, is it can be used in various good ways. Another thing you can do to make the air look a bit better is maybe use the mushroom platforms too, as they look a lot like tree stumps. But that's enough with semi-solids. Well, no, it's not. I'll talk about some other things you can do with air design, because with air design there's not very much that you can do with it, compared to block design, since for air design it has to be stuff the player can interact with without actually interacting with it. Good for design and good for not letting the player bump their head on anything. So solid blocks for air design is a complete no. So we'll quickly cover different ways to use air design. So the way you'll want to use air design seriously depends on what type of level you're having. So let's take a look at what can be done with this location, depending on the theme. For themes that are meant to be natural, say like the underground, you'll want to be a lot more random and subtle with your air decoration. Say, for example, these semi-solids are just kind of sprawn around everywhere, but that makes the level still look better than nothing, and by doing something like this, you can have a really cool effect without it looking like it's been actually built by a person. However, one thing to note, say, by using vines for air decoration is that it can make a level cheesable, because if somebody's, like, really good, I'm pretty sure it would be possible to jump around that and make it up here. Though, of course, if you design it well enough, it shouldn't be cheesable, though, of course, vines often can lead to some cheese. Another thing you can use semi-solids for is just using them, say, this skull type thing to mark where the ground is, and this kind of, mushroomy type one to mark where the floor is. Though, of course, it's kind of obvious where the holes in the floor are and the floor are. This also makes the level look pretty good compared to just, you know, the underground's usual pitch black empty background, which is basically, as you can see here, a complete void. However, if this exact block layout was used inside of a castle, you'd have to use air design a little bit differently, as compared to the randomness of natural levels, castles are basically guaranteed to be man-made, same with airships. So you should use the block design which comes out of the ground alongside semi-solids to make it look very organized, as though it's been built by somebody, as it was, because castle levels are meant to be built by Bowser. So a design example like this works pretty well for a castle. You can also use air design in very good ways which can warn players about obstacles. One way to warn players using blocks and semi-solids about dangers is like this. For example, the upcoming platform has some hard blocks and a semi-solid on top of it, and it is 4 blocks wide. You might be wondering why, and that's because there's a giant thwomp which would crash down and would be pretty random if it wasn't for this design. But keep in mind, thwomps are very cheesable in themselves. Another thing you can do is use designs to warn people, say, about off-screen dangers that are too fast to react to, like lava bubbles. One way to do it is by just creating a long mushroom stem where the bubble will be, like this. So the bubble jumps up and down it, as seen here. Or you could do it in an example like this, where you show the bottom of the mushroom platform being how high the lava bubble will jump. Of course, this also is kind of questionable for the design. So you might want to put something else here instead of a mushroom platform, or use a mushroom platform on specifically a different theme. So for the final thing, I'll quickly show a couple examples of how I use block design in my levels, by showing you a couple sections from levels which I have made, though not featured on my channel. So for example, in this level I use a lot of block design on the internal area of the airships with these windows and stuff, which randomly pop up with the ground but can be copied. I also use semi-solids for block design, and 1 block wide ground for block design in order to create a sort of mast looking thing. I also put some pipes on the edges of the airships to make them look a little bit better. Another thing I'll note is a semi-solid being used here instead of normal ground, because in an airship theme it just looks better. Another thing I've done in this part is I've used semi-solids to convey the fact that the semi-solids are keeping these platforms afloat. Meanwhile up there, though a bit random with the little designs that come out of the ground, I have it so that there's more masts and even little enemies. So that's one example, and I'll quickly show you another. Another example of a level where I use block design is this level, Mario on the Moon, which is another one of my levels. I might link these level IDs in the description, by the way, because both are uploaded. So, as you can see in these walls, I've made the walls a bit more vibrant than just pure cloud, and I've even made the block design a little bit better too, as you can see. So the block design here looks a bit less bland than just the clouds. I've put the semi-solids like this so that it kind of looks a bit more open. So the semi-solids don't cover up every bit of air in between each block, but they're still there. I've also used specifically these green mushroom platforms here to kind of alert players that there's a 1-up here. I've also used cloud blocks here because they work a bit better amongst these kind of cloudish looking blocks. And I've even used the blue pipes here because they look the most similar to the semi-solids. Color coordination can often be a very good asset within levels in making them look better. There's also an underground section which I'll get to now in this level. But this is a level which I'd say is complete and finished in terms of design. Though this part is upside down, and sorry if this like confuses anybody, but I use semi-solids quite a lot in this underground part. And of course it makes the level look a bit better than just the night starry sky, though the starry sky also looks pretty good. Which is why I didn't use any semi-solids with, like, no holes in them. So you can still kind of see the starry sky through the semi-solids. Overall, I think this adds to create a good design. So this has been the end of my little guide on how to use block design and air design to good effect in order to create some good levels. And if you enjoyed this guide, maybe leave a like and subscribe. I was thinking of doing more guides on Mario Maker, say about the different types of items you can use alongside just gameplay design in general, say like an auto-scrolling guide. So if you want any sort of guides like that, feel free to leave a comment giving me a suggestion. But for now, I've covered a lot on block and air design. If you think there's more I should cover, I'll make a part 2. Though, if I disagree, I probably won't make a part 2, because I've covered quite a lot here. But for now, I'm going to go back to work on my troll level, because it is nearly complete. And I can't wait to unveil it to everybody. You can leave now.